9 tips for a longer, healthier life. Does where you live really matter? And what about genetics? Let's dive in. Welcome to a Healthy Control podcast, providing education to create a healthy, balanced lifestyle, empowering you to take control of your health and not let health take control of you. I'm super excited about today's episode, but before we get into it, I do want to make one disclaimer. This is true with a lot of research, is that it's correlated, not causative, meaning that correlated happens when two things happen together. Causative, things cause something. So if you score more points on the scoreboard than your opponent, it'll cause you to win. Correlated means when we see A happen, we also see B happen. But we cannot say that one necessarily causes the other, just that they seem to happen together. So back when I was in school, there was a certain chart that they showed us to really drive this point home. It was that whenever Nicolas Cage movies came out, there was a spike of deaths in San Francisco. So they both happened, but I don't think we can necessarily say that Nicolas Cage caused these people to die. It was just correlated. So 9 things here. Strong correlations, strong observations that they saw between these groups of people and living longer, healthier lives. There's a man named Dan, and he went on exploration to discover the secrets of longevity of 5 places in the world who have people who consistently live over 100 years old. This really struck a chord with me because, well, I want to live a long life. My grandmother passed away about a week before her 96th birthday, and my grandfather is 95 and still living. On the other side of my family, I think I had a grandma or a great-grandma who was 99. So I aspire to live as old as they were, if not older. So I'm curious personally to see how many of these things matched up with what they were doing and then how we can implement them into our own lives as well. So there's going to be 5 places we're looking at, and this is where my pronunciation is really going to bite me in the butt. But the first one is Loma Linda in Southern California, Nicoya in Costa Rica, Sardinia in Italy, Ikaria in Greece, and Okinawa in Japan. So the cutoff or the criteria is that the inhabitants reach 100 years old, 100 times more likely than a typical American. So we're going to go over these 9 commonalities that were found between these communities, and as always, some small and big steps that you can take to integrate this into your life. So what is the first step? Step 1, move naturally. From the research, it says, the world's longest lived people do not pump iron, run marathons, or join gyms. Instead, they live in environments that constantly nudge them into moving without thinking about it. They grow gardens and do not have mechanical conveniences for house or yard work. So what surprised me is that they didn't work out per se. However, when we really dive into it, they're doing all those things just in unconventional ways. Let's think about this. If you go to the gym for 2 hours, that still leaves you 22 hours of the day you're not moving. It's great to get your heart rate up. It's good to be strong and have muscle, but if I had to choose someone to move 10 hours a day and not work out, quote unquote, I'd rather them do that than sit for 10 hours a day and only work out for 2 hours. Now I get it. There's a lot of desk jobs out there or jobs where you just simply can't get up and move. So let's chat about the 28-2 rule. This is what you can do at work here. Within a 30-minute period, you spend 20 minutes sitting, 8 minutes standing, and 2 minutes walking. This is great for both energy consumption, burning more calories. It's also great for posture, just to not be in the same position all day long. So the town in Italy, one of the 5 cities there, the inhabitants average 5 mountainous miles per day, and their cardiovascular benefits are incredible. The study recalls a story about Dr. Ellsworth Wareham, who is 95 years old. He wanted to build a fence, and it was about $6,000, so he did it himself. And 3 days later, he ended up in open heart surgery as the surgeon. And that was one of 20 surgeries that month. He's 95 years old, built his own fence, and had 20 surgeries, performed 20 surgeries in 1 month at 95 years old. That is incredible. Let's talk about life radius here and It may make a lot more sense why the blue zone, that's what these 5 places are called, the blue zone, and other countries have it much easier than a lot of us Americans do to naturally be active. So the life radius is the 5 miles that surround your house, and we spend roughly 90% of our life in that 5-mile radius. Without getting super nitpicky, I do think it varies slightly depending on your work and home situation. If you live somewhere like downtown New York where you're walking everywhere, it probably is more like the 5-mile radius. But if you live more in the Midwest where you're driving 30 minutes to work, your zone varies a little bit. Maybe you have a work zone and a home zone, but nonetheless, we are made up of what's around us. Just like you want to surround yourself with good people, you want to surround yourself in a good area as well. And there's 115 evidence-based design tweaks and policies that can be put into place so that when people show up to school, work, church, stores, restaurants, whatever, they're mindlessly nudged to eat less and move more. And these tweaks are things like standing desk at work, so you can do your 28-2 rule, removing vending machines from schools because those are never healthy snacks, safe walking paths in communities and neighborhoods, and encouraging Moai. And we'll get more into Moai later. But just think about this 5-mile radius. If there's 6 or more fast food restaurants within a half mile of an individual's home, they're 40% more likely to be obese than if there's 3 or less. If the streets are walkable, bikeable, parks are cleaned up, and the active option is the easy option, physical activity of the entire population can raise by 30%. When I think about my personal situation, we have walking paths with our neighborhood. But on the other hand, I can think of about 7, 8, 9 fast food restaurants within 2 miles of me. And I pass most of those on the way home from work. And I think that's what is so hard for a lot of us is that the way our towns and communities are designed here in America, health, fitness, activity, moving is not prioritized as much as convenience, food, and those unhealthy habits. So what are some more practical tips on moving more naturally? Again, the 28-2 rule. Secondly, do things for yourself, such as build a fence if you're able to. One thing that is common to hire out is lawn care. Personally, again, for me to do my yard and do all the weeding and edging and blah, 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 it's about an hour to an hour and a half. And it gives me something to be proud of when I do it. Now, don't mishear me. I know there's some people who simply don't have the time to keep up with it, don't want to learn about the fertilizing and overseeding and aerating schedule and all those other things that come with it. But if you're buying back that hour of your life by having someone else do it, what are you doing with your hour that you just bought? Are you sitting behind a desk? Are you watching TV? Or are you going for a walk or to the gym or being active? So if you're going to buy back your time, make sure you're using that time for good use. This next example may be a little more applicable to everyone or more people, but grocery shopping. Do you do it yourself, or are you one of those curbside pickup, delivery type of people? It's so easy nowadays to have food just show up at your front door within a few minutes of just some thumb twiddling. And sadly enough, I think it might become the future that we don't actually go into grocery stores. If you have the time in the day, go get those steps by just walking around the grocery store. All right, we got 8 more to go. Let's get into the next one. The number 2 commonality, and these are in no particular order, is purpose. The Okinawas call it ikagi, which translates roughly to why I wake up in the morning. If you can answer what your life purpose is, what your daily purpose is, that can add an extra 7 years onto your life expectancy. 7 years just because you know what you're doing and your bigger purpose. You may think it's really cute, or maybe it's just sad. I don't really know. But how many people do you know, or how many elderly couples have you seen where one person passes and then the partner passes within the next few months or the next year? For some of those people, their purpose was their relationship. And once that was gone, they had no more purpose and they were done. You can see that they just gave up. Likewise, how many people either don't want to retire because they don't know what to do, or they retire and they have nothing to do because they have not found that new purpose. I've worked with many people who are at the 9-to-5 jobs well into their 70s. And when I ask them, like, how many more years you got? There's usually two reasons why they're still there, and that's either poor financial planning in their younger days, or they just don't know what else to do with their day. They haven't found that next purpose. You were put on this earth to do something, and to do a lot of different somethings. Our purposes will change throughout our lives, but there's always a purpose for you there. I love looking at life as a bunch of seasons. People come and go, purposes come and go, and that's okay. It's okay to move on to the next chapter. It can be exciting, it could be scary. But in that next chapter, find your new purpose, and it can be just as fulfilling as the one you just had. Number 3. This next one is something Americans do pretty well, but in the wrong way. But first, let's take a break. Number 3, downshift. Relaxing can be extremely beneficial for us, and Americans are great at it. Come home from work, eat, relax for several hours, go to bed. Relaxing or downshifting is very important for stress management. And let's touch on chronic stress really quick. Chronic stress has been linked to a decline in prefrontal cortex and the hippocampus. To keep it light here, the prefrontal cortex is responsible for thinking, and the hippocampus deals with memory. Higher stress can promote tumorigenesis, which is the creation of cancer. It can also lower the body's immune system too. So yeah, let's not have that. Let's not have cancer. Let's not have decreased immune system. Let's not have decreased thinking and decreased memory. Let's properly and safely utilize downshifting. And there's some common practices that those in the blue zone practice that we can implement to our own daily routines. The people in Japan have a phrase, nankuru nesa, which is supposed to mean things will work out somehow. I think Americans have this same type of phrase of this too shall pass. Bad things, unideal situations are going to happen, but you will find a way through them. I'm going to steal this from a TV show, This Is Us, where in a bad situation, they would play a game and name worst case scenarios. So let's say you get called into your boss's office, and you can play this game. Worst case scenario, I get fired, can't get a new job, end up working at a fast food chain, I can never leave, we'll have to downsize our house, sell a car, probably have to walk to work. That's a lot of bad stuff that could happen from getting called into your boss's office. But what are the odds of all that? Probably not likely. Probably there's going to tell you there's a meeting or there's something else going on. Or let's say you do get terminated. What are the odds you never get a new job again? Those odds are very small. But just verbalizing it can make you realize that your fears are far worse than your reality. So when you walk into their office and they just ask you to stay late tomorrow, that's not nearly as bad as what could have happened. Another practice we can implement from the people of Greece is to take a nap. A 2011 study suggests a midday nap may lower rates of depression and stress, thus lowering cardiovascular disease and all those other chronic stress things we talked about earlier. And another study showed people who nap regularly have 35% lower chance of dying from heart disease. 35%, I will take that gladly. By the way, depending on what order these all get aired on, we either just had or we're about to have a whole episode on sleeping and napping, and you might find that pretty beneficial. Now let's go here to the fourth commonality, the 80% rule. Now this one really surprised me, something I had never thought of. I've heard of the 80-20 rule. 80% of results come from 20% of your effort. 80% of your sales come from 20% of your customers. I mean, shoot, clean your house. 80% of that wow factor is just vacuuming and cleaning countertops versus the baseboards and all the other little things that you do. Anyways, for the 80% rule, we're headed back to Japan, where the phrase hara hachi bu, which roughly translates into eat until you're 8 parts full or belly 80% full. So the 80% rule is only let yourself get 80% full when you're eating. Here in America, 1/3 of people are overweight and another third are obese. This means to be an average American, you're unhealthy. You're at an unhealthy weight. In Japan, that number drops from 1/3, like it is here, to 4%. Just 4% of people in Japan are obese. Hara hachi bu. 80% full. I believe I was watching TV about probably Food Network, but There was this Italian talking, and he said that Italians taste with their tongues, but Americans taste with the back of our throats. The next time you're eating, think about the food, think about your stomach, and most importantly, listen to your hunger cues. We have such a tendency to mindlessly eat because we're watching TV or on our phone or driving. My goodness, we do a bunch of other things when we're eating besides actually just eat, and it leads to overeating. When we're distracted, we're not listening to our body, and we're just going to keep eating and eating until we realize we're full, and at that point, it's too late. Now, it's not completely our fault. There's actually a problematic upbringing life lesson we were taught, and that's no one's fault either. It all makes sense, but it was to finish your plate. So now, instead of being taught to listen to our stomachs, we're taught to watch our plate, and we cannot stop eating until that plate is empty. This honestly probably comes from like the 1920s when what was on your plate wasn't a whole lot, so you better finish it. And then that generation taught the next generation to always finish your plate because you don't know if you're going to get more food or not. And that lesson stayed on, even though our availability of food increased dramatically. I'm just kind of spitballing here, but that's makes sense to me at least. However, now we have giant plates with giant amounts of food, and it's creating giant people. All right, number 5, plant slant. Now, this one I have a little bit of beef with, and that is a vegetarian diet. I'll be here all week. Let's take an excerpt from the British Medical Journal. Epidemiology identifies associations between aspects of diet, nutrition, and physical activity with one or more cancers. There's evidence for plausible mechanisms that imply these are causal. Some nutritional exposures, alcohol and processed meat, are likely causal factors, but no singular factor protects against cancer except for dietary fiber and colorectal cancer. Cancer protection mainly derives from a systematic metabolic environment that promotes healthy cell replication and tissue integrity. Such a nutritional state reflects avoiding excess adiposity through healthy dietary patterns rich in plant foods, like legumes, whole grains, pulses, vegetables, and fruits, with modest meat, fish, and dairy, low in alcohol and preserved foods, and an active way of life, avoiding sedentary behaviors. So the commonality here is that we need to eat more vegetables. And then the British Medical Journal is saying eat more vegetables, modest amounts of meat, fish, dairy, and move more. Where have we heard that one before? Now, personally, I believe we should all be consuming probably more veggies, beans, and legumes. And fiber is extremely important, especially if you have GI issues like constipation. It's possible you need more fiber. Now, this is not a medical advice, but just go with me for a second. The hard thing is that the recommended amount of times to go number 2 is between 3 times per day and 3 times per week. So, yeah, that's pretty wild. There's not a really good how often you should be going number 2. That being said, you should never have to strain to go poop. It should always be rather easy. So, in regards to fiber, do you know how much you actually need per day? And do you know how many Americans are actually getting enough? That answer shocked me, and we're going to get into that after the break. How many Americans are getting enough fiber in their diet? 50%. 50% of Americans are getting enough fiber. That is so incredibly low. So what is enough fiber? Women should be aiming for at least 25 grams and men at least 35 grams. Albeit, 50% is better than our overweight obesity rate at 67%, but that's still so low. In these places where there's more 100-year-old people, they eat quite a lot of beans, lentils, legumes, which are all filled with fiber. Is that correlated or associated? I'm not sure, but let's just challenge ourselves to hit that fiber count. And I think one easy step for everyone is 1 day per week, just try a vegetarian meal. You might just find your family's new favorite dish. Number 6, alcohol. I know this may get a little controversial, and right off the bat, if you're not of legal drinking age, I do not recommend drinking. We're going to look to some alternatives to this as well. So what's up with this? It's not actually just any alcohol, it's wine. From a 2019 study, benefits of moderate alcohol consumption have been widely supported by the scientific literature, and in this line, red wine intake has been related to a lesser risk of coronary heart disease, and mainly attributed to this outcome the presence in red wine of a great variety of polyphenol compounds. Most notably, resveratrol is considered the most effective wine compound with the prevention of coronary heart disease because of its antioxidant properties. So, wine is good for antioxidants. I also think it relates really well to the category we talked about before, downshifting and stress reduction. But antioxidant, what exactly is that? So from the National Center of Complementary and Integrative Health, during normal activities, our body cells produce highly reactive substances that contain oxygen. Overproduction of these substances can lead to a condition called oxidative stress, which may damage cells and contribute to chronic diseases such as heart disease and cancer. Our bodies have preventative and repair mechanisms that regulate oxidative stress pathways, and research has shown that antioxidant enzymes are the most important components of this defense system. So antioxidants help relieve or decrease this oxidative stress that our bodies are naturally producing. Now, they do make antioxidant supplements, but from what I was reading, they're nowhere near as good as the real thing. So how much wine or how much antioxidants do you need? From this study, they were drinking roughly 1 or 2 glasses a day. And for the record, drinking 1 or 2 glasses per day, so we should be shooting for about 650 milligrams of these polyphenols, and there's about 8,000 or so different types. So it's good to consume different foods that contain it. So here's some non-alcoholic places we can get them. Blackberries, raspberries, strawberries all have about 100 or so of these polyphenols, but blueberries actually have 5 times the amount per half cup. So 500 right there almost hits your daily minimum. Cocoa powder actually has quite a bit. However, if we heat it up, it goes down to about 500 per tablespoon. Dark chocolate has roughly 200, and then chocolate milk has about 35. So the more we process it, the worse it gets. Tree nuts have quite a bit as well. Chestnuts come out on top with 347 milligrams per ounce. Hazelnuts and pecans have about 140 milligrams. Almonds have about 53 per 1 ounce serving. Flax seeds have 229 milligrams per tablespoon. Coffee has about 35. And vegetables vary greatly, but you're at least getting some in your vegetables. So if we can have a serving of nuts, maybe some vegetables, cup of coffee, and a half cup to a full cup of berries, we're probably set for the day. Number 7 and number 8. So I'm going to put these next two together, and then we'll have one more after this, which I believe is actually the most meaningful. So the two here, number 7 and 8, is belong and right tribe. So these two observations here show that belonging to a faith-based community can increase your lifespan, and denomination does not matter. The other aspect is how important it is to be born or to choose the right social circle. Believe it or not, smoking, obesity, loneliness, and happiness are all contagious. We've all been around that person at work who's just miserable, the miserable old grump, and they make everyone else around them feel miserable too. We also know when someone's laughing, it's virtually impossible to not laugh alongside them. Laughing is contagious, happiness is contagious, and being a miserable grump is contagious. So surround yourself with good people, and people who want to better themselves, and people who maybe already follow some of these habits here. And I know it can be incredibly hard, especially with toxic friends and family members. We feel torn, and it can be difficult to walk that line of their family versus they're toxic. I understand that can be very difficult, and sometimes you just can't get out of it. But when you're able to surround yourself with good people, good things are going to happen. So the people of Japan have this thing called moai, which is a group of 5 friends that are committed to each other, and they're best friends for life. Well, this one specific moai they discovered had been together for 97 years, and the average age of that group is 102. Talk about surrounding yourself with some good people. They meet every day, and they gossip, and they talk, and they hang out. If one of them didn't show up, the other 4 put on their shoes, walk across the village, and go check on their friends. that is more than just a best friend. That is family. Which leads us to our last observation. Number 9, loved ones first. Successful centenarians put their families first, not work. This may look like keeping an aging parent or grandparent nearby or even in the home. Having a committed life partner can add up to 3 years of life expectancy. They invest in their children with time and love, not necessarily with money and gifts, which can come full circle when they're older and their kids keep them close. I remember hearing someone talk once, and this hit me really hard. Growing up, I always heard that you should show up early, stay late if needed, be the best, most giving worker I could be. Treat the company right and they'll take care of you. Well, this might have been the case 60 years ago when, for the most part, people found one job, stayed there all their lives, and even had a pension. But now pensions are gone and 401ks allow us to move freely between jobs. And it's almost easier to leave your job and get a new one with a higher pay than to ask your current employer for more money. But they said stop doing that. Stop giving your time. You show up on time, you leave on time, and you give them all your effort on time. But clock out, go home, and be with family. I don't want to discredit any of those parents who are working 2 to 3 jobs in order to survive or to push their family further. You do what you have to do to be successful because I know you're doing that for the betterment of your family. We all have to make sacrifices, and maybe for you, your sacrifice is family time in order to put food on the table. And just know if you're in the thick of that, even when the family doesn't show it, they are eternally grateful for all that you're doing. We often see as people get older, the attention shifts from working to creating memories and connections. You hear from very wealthy people that money is not everything, and it's not. Money is a tool, and it's a very necessary tool in this world, but it's nowhere near as wonderful and fulfilling as the personal connections that we carry throughout our lives. I can remember years ago how I felt at my wedding day, but I can't even guess for a second how much money we had in our bank. Thank you for listening to A Healthy Control podcast. You can find us at YouTube at A Healthy Control and make sure to subscribe. You can also reach me at ahealthycontrol@gmail.com with any comments or questions you'd like answered on the show. Reminder, A Healthy Control podcast is for entertainment purposes only and not in lieu of any medical advice. If you have any concerns about your health, please speak to a healthcare provider.